Welcome to the Celiac Diaries podcast. I'm your host, Lucia Cordero, and this is where we get real about life with celiac disease. Each week, I'll share practical gluten-free tips, wellness hacks, and honest conversations about the emotional side of living with an autoimmune condition. Think of this as your weekly mix of support, relatability, and inspiration to help you not just survive, but thrive with celiac. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder, I'm not a medical professional. Everything I share is based on my own experience living with celiac disease. This podcast is not medical advice, so please always consult your doctor about your own health. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Celiac Diaries. Hello. It's your host, Lucia Cordero. I'm so excited to be back for yet another episode. It's the fourth episode of the podcast. This is becoming a part of my weekly routine now, which is so exciting. A little life update at the beginning of the pod. I've been so busy. As I mentioned in my last episode, I just had a weekend trip to Louisiana. We're back in business. We're back in the city for the foreseeable future. Foreseeable future meaning a few weeks, which is nice. But I'm really excited to be back in routine. Work has been so busy, but it's been really fun. I'm so excited about the podcast. The clips have been performing really, really well on TikTok, which is getting me excited. It's really stirring up conversation in the comments and community, which is what this podcast is all about. It's not just about me talking into a microphone. It's about really facilitating community and connection with people that have celiac disease or gluten-free. So I'm really excited to see that, and definitely go follow the pod on TikTok if you haven't yet. It's at Celiac Diaries Pod. We're also on Instagram, but the Instagram algorithm isn't as friendly, but we're staying consistent over there too. Yeah, I'm also really excited because I have 4 guests lined up this fall to be on the podcast. I'm recording those episodes really, really soon. I think I record the first episode next week as I'm recording this. So a lot is on the pipeline for Celiac Diaries. Get so excited. But with that in mind, today's episode, I'm also really excited about. Say excited one more time. But I really wanted to talk to you guys about ultra-processed gluten-free foods and a realization that I had with those that really just changed my entire life, honestly, but especially my management of celiac disease and gut health. And I'm just really looking forward to sharing this with you guys because it really changed my life, and I hope you have some takeaways from it too. And it has a positive impact on your life. But I'm basically just going to be getting into how limiting ultra-processed foods and focusing on naturally gluten-free whole foods has had such a positive impact on my gut health, celiac symptoms, energy levels, happiness, inflammation, everything and more. And it's going to be such a fun episode. So I'm going to get into the research, my own experience, and then what I actually eat now on a daily basis that makes me feel so much better. That's today's episode, but before we get into it, it's time for news of the week. So today's story is that California just passed a law to phase out ultra-processed foods in public schools. They're giving a timeline where certain ultra-processed items must stop being served in school lunches and breakfasts by 2035. So this is really interesting because, as I will get into in this episode, a lot of the gluten-free products we rely on as people with celiac disease are ultra-processed. This is relevant because it just shows that our institutions are beginning to really recognize that processed foods are a health risk, and public policy is finally starting to catch up to what a lot of us have been feeling in our bodies. I love following Food Babe on Instagram. She's always posting about this stuff, and she's really a strong advocate for trying to create laws or public policies that help regulate these ultra-processed foods and dyes and artificial ingredients that are just not healthy for us. So I remember first hearing about this story from her Instagram, such a good follow. But specifically, this relates to people with celiac disease because so many gluten-free products are ultra-processed. And this law just kind of gives evidence to everything that I'm really sharing in this episode of why we really need to think beyond just gluten-free products and think more towards whole foods. I think it's great that policymakers are recognizing what functional medicine is, what nutrition experts have been saying for years, that ultra-processed foods in itself is a health issue. I love that this conversation is becoming more mainstream. So that's our news of the week. Now it's time for our gluten-free fave of the week. In the spirit of this episode, I'm choosing a naturally whole gluten-free food, and I decided to pick kiwi. I'm newly kind of obsessed with kiwi. I started buying these over the summer because they have them at my bodega, and I put them in my yogurt bowls every single morning. I do buy them pre-sliced, but you could buy them non-pre-sliced. Kiwis are just great. They're packed with vitamin C, antioxidants, fiber, so good for your gut health and digestion. There's a lot of research about kiwi and all of its positive effects that you can look up for yourself, but I just love that it's a real food. It's so simple. No ingredient list, no label, no product. This is kind of like de-influencing you a little bit from all of those gluten-free products out there, but just something that's naturally from nature and gluten-free and so delicious. So if you notice some kiwi in your grocery store this week, grab a few, think of Celiac Diaries, and add them to your breakfast. I love them in my morning yogurt bowls. You can also add them to smoothies or even just like have them as a snack. All right, so that ties us up for our weekly segments. I hope you guys are loving those. I think they're so fun. Now let's get in to the meat of this episode, talking all about ultra-processed gluten-free foods and how I've noticed such a difference by taking those out of my diet and instead focusing on whole, natural, gluten-free ingredients and foods. When you first get diagnosed with celiac disease, and even years later, there's really this obsession of finding the gluten-free version of absolutely everything that you used to be able to eat as a normal person. And I was so guilty of this whenever I was younger. I was like constantly being like, wow, I need to get the gluten-free version of X, Y, and Z, and like beg my mom for it. And even when I was 22 in post-grad, I literally was that girl that had a freezer full of all of the Trader Joe's gluten-free items. Like, they have the craziest names. There's like gluten-free pumpkin muffins, pumpkin spice pancake puffs drizzled with coconut powder, gluten-free. Like, they have the craziest names, but you know what I mean. And you think that you're doing such a great thing for your health with that because you are buying the gluten-free versions of products. But if you're anything like how I was, I still felt awful, and I had so much inflammation in my body from having all of these ultra-processed gluten-free versions of products, even though I wasn't actually eating gluten and I was technically doing everything right. And it wasn't until I actually started to look at the ingredients list and labels beyond just if something had gluten in it when I realized that I had like fallen into this trap of the gluten-free food myth, which is, and I mentioned this in my first episode, I believe, and so many of you resonated with this, but there is a myth out there that gluten-free products are automatically healthier than the regular versions of the same products. However, if you look at the ingredients list and actually compare the gluten-free products to the regular products, you will find that the gluten-free products tend to have a much longer, much more ultra-processed ingredients list full of stuff you can't pronounce, and there's just no way that it can actually be good for you. Most gluten-free substitutes, and I challenge you, go take a look at all of the gluten-free substitutes that you have in your fridge. Your gluten-free breads, cookies, cereals, even just snack bars are ultra-processed. They're made with refined starches, and they have added gums, emulsifiers, and seed oils to mimic the texture of wheat. So if you are someone that doesn't have a gluten disorder and you're just eating the gluten-free version of a bread or a muffin or a pastry to be healthier, you're really doing yourself a disservice because those products are actually much, much worse for you than the regular versions if you don't have a need to be gluten-free. And the research backs this up. So there's a study, and I'll link all of the studies that I reference in this episode in the show notes, but one study compared gluten-free products to their regular versions and found that gluten-free alternatives actually tend to have more fat and carbs and less fiber and protein. Obviously, fat and carbs are not, inherently bad for you, but that's just the facts there. And they also tend to be lower in vitamins and minerals, which is ironic because people with celiac disease have damaged intestines and malabsorption issues. So you really need to be focused on making sure you're getting all your fiber and protein and vitamin and minerals. Also, broadly speaking, a CDC report showed that more than 58% of the average American's calories come from ultra-processed foods. That's actually kind of scary. So that includes things like energy bars, chips, frozen meals, and obviously gluten-free substitutes. A lot of them fall into that. But the difference is that for the general population, if you're having an ultra-processed food, you know that you're having an ultra-processed food. It's pretty plain and clear. But for people with celiac, even products that for regular people wouldn't be ultra-processed, the gluten-free versions of them have become ultra-processed. Like, so much gluten-free bread is ultra-processed due to just the way that companies have to make the products to make them gluten-free. So even if you're technically following a gluten-free diet, it still could be full of ultra-processed foods, which in turn causes inflammation, blood sugar spikes, and fatigue, and also is just not giving your body the proper nutrients that it needs. And you really need to be intentional about getting your proper nutrients if you have a damaged gut from celiac disease. So to get a little bit more into exactly what's happening here, again, I'm not a doctor. You can do your own research on ultra-processed foods and their effects. But essentially, refined starches digest super quickly, which spikes your blood sugar and then crashes it later. So that gives you the brain fog, fatigue, mood dips. Seed oils, those aren't, inherently evil, but a lot of those, like sunflower or soybean oil, are used in so many gluten-free packaged products, and you're just layering more stress on your body. And when you're already dealing with autoimmune inflammation from celiac disease, just adding anything else that's an inflammatory stressor just tips the scale. So as we know, celiac itself is inflammatory, and your immune system is already on high alert if you have celiac disease. So when you feed it highly processed gluten-free foods, it's just like adding fuel to an already burning fire. And I really felt that. I used to have ultra-processed gluten-free breads, pastries, cookies all the time, and I didn't feel great. I was anxious. I felt very inflamed. Looking back on photos, I feel like my face was puffier. My skin looked dull. And at the time, I didn't even really understand the impact of ultra-processed foods. I thought I was doing a good job just from buying gluten-free versions of things. And I never took the time to really look at the ingredients list beyond just having gluten in it, or taking the time to think about how that was actually impacting my body. And it wasn't until, honestly, just listening to wellness podcasts that I was able to learn about this. So that's a little full circle. I hope, if this is something that you haven't been aware of, this opens a little door or window for you to researching and learning more about it. Again, don't take my word for everything. Take everything with a grain of salt and do your own research. But maybe this opens a door for you. But for me, when I started learning about it, I stripped back my diet. I decided to cut out packaged gluten-free foods and added sugars and just focus on real, natural, whole food, gluten-free ingredients. Think vegetables, healthy fats, meats, things that don't have an ingredients list, like salmon, broccoli, avocado, eggs. And I really noticed, it took some time, but my digestion improved, my energy stabilized, and my inflammation went down overall. And there's science that supports this too. There's actually a clinical trial in process right now that's testing whether reducing ultra-processed gluten-free foods can directly improve health outcomes for people with celiac disease. So researchers are really studying this. I'll link that in the show notes. But the lesson here is that just because something is labeled as gluten-free or even certified gluten-free, it doesn't mean that it's nourishing your body and that it's what your body needs. When you have celiac disease, your body is already prone to inflammation, and ultra-processed gluten-free foods can just make that worse, even if they technically don't have gluten in them. And no one tells you that when you're first diagnosed. They just tell you to eat gluten-free, but you can still eat gluten-free and still feel undernourished, inflamed, and tired. And the real healing of celiac disease starts when you move beyond just focusing on eliminating gluten and also focus on eating whole foods that are actually feeding your gut and addressing your nutrient needs. So that was a good little intro to this topic. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about this, but I want to get more into the why here. So really, why does this affect people with celiac disease? So as we know, celiac disease is an autoimmune inflammatory condition. even minor insults like oxidized fats, artificial additives, emulsifiers, those can stir residual inflammation because your gut is already so sensitive. And the reason why it's so important for people with celiac disease to be aware of this is because the general population needs to be aware of this too. Like, this is not just, ultra-processed foods is not just a crisis affecting people without celiac disease. It is really something that's affecting everybody. But when you have celiac disease, you're already so much more sensitive. So you just have to be extra on top of it and aware of it because it's like compounding stress, basically. So as I said before, like, in this modern world, we like to simplify it that like, oh, you just avoid gluten, you'll be totally fine with celiac disease. That's not how it works. Managing a chronic health issue requires a holistic approach. You really gotta check on your diet, not just in avoiding gluten, but focusing on what nutrients you're getting and healing your gut from the inside out, focusing on exercise and sleep. Like, everything is all connected. I think oftentimes when we go to the doctor, they just simplify things for us and they're like, oh, easy, you just avoid gluten, you'll be totally fine. But there's really so much more to that. And if you are gluten-free but not feeling better, maybe this is a piece of that puzzle that could help you get on that journey to really thriving with celiac disease and managing your chronic health condition in a way that is going to make you feel your best. So that's kind of the reason why ultra-processed foods really does affect people with celiac disease. Again, it affects everyone, not just people with celiac disease, but that's why it's especially important to people with celiac disease. Going back to what I was saying at the beginning of the episode, whenever you're first diagnosed, it's normal to miss foods that you once enjoyed when you were pre-celiac. But I think something that's really freeing is to not feel the pressure to enjoy the gluten-free version of things that you used to like. For example, I remember when gluten-free Oreos came out, I was so excited. I bought them like the day they were available and was freaking out about it, fangirling. But if you take a look at the ingredients list for gluten-free Oreos, it's insane. It's filled with artificial flavors, high-intensity sweeteners. Obviously, regular Oreos aren't really the healthiest for you either, so this isn't the best example, but if you compare regular Oreos to gluten-free Oreos, the gluten-free version has xanthan gum added, which helps mimic the chewy texture. But xanthan gum is, something that can be really difficult for people to digest and can cause bloating for people with sensitive guts, which are people that are likely having the gluten-free version of something. And they also took out the wheat flour, which makes sense, but they replaced it with white rice flour and tapioca starch. So that's really the difference. Again, this isn't the best example, but sometimes you'll find gluten-free versions of something that comes out, but you don't even realize that it's actually more processed than the original product. And at some point, once you start focusing on the ingredients list and eating foods for the way that it'll make your body feel rather than eating foods for the way that they taste, you kind of realize that the gluten-free versions of all of your favorite foods aren't really worth it with the inflammation and stress that it'll cause your body. I mean, balance is key. Obviously, it's okay to have those sometimes, but if you're having them every day, that really is going to compound stress over time. So at the end of the day, the takeaway here is just that healing is about so much more than just eliminating gluten. It's really about restoring your nutrition, calming inflammation, and focusing on real whole foods. So with that being said, I'm going to get into more about the power of whole foods. So as I mentioned, last year probably is when I really kind of started to focus on this. I was starting to listen to more wellness podcasts, and I discovered what ultra-processed foods even were and started to think about what I was actually eating on a daily basis. And I really scaled back and decided to just only eat whole, natural, gluten-free foods, no more prepackaged, ultra-processed items. To be clear, that means just like simple, nutrient-dense meals. So like real meat, eggs, fruits, vegetables, rice, potatoes, olive oil, nuts, seeds. And my body really started to feel so much better because I was actually getting proper nutrients and nourishment. And when you go back to that, your intestines start to heal and you slowly start to feel better. And processed gluten-free foods rarely have the nutrition and fuel that you really need to have a balanced and healthy diet. There's actually studies that show this. Don't just take my word for it. But people with celiac disease who emphasize naturally gluten-free foods tend to have higher antioxidant intake and better overall diet quality compared to those who rely on packaged gluten-free products. My personal experience, I can attest to the fact that I feel so much better focusing on whole, natural, gluten-free foods as opposed to packaged foods. And there's even studies that are coming out more about that as well. And getting more into the science, basically, when you eat whole foods, you're feeding your gut microbiome these fibers and antioxidants that are strengthening the intestinal barrier and reducing oxidative stress, and that is soothing your inflammation. On the flip side, if you're eating ultra-processed foods, they will do the opposite. They will spike your blood sugar and increase inflammation in the gut. There's also studies showing that people with celiac have lingering inflammation after going gluten-free, especially if their diet is lacking in nutrients. So even though gluten might be gone from your diet, your body is still healing, and the foods that you choose to eat every day can either help with that process or hinder that process. It's your choice. Another kind of buzzword that gets thrown around when people talk about having a whole foods diet is anti-inflammatory. But basically what that means is just like prioritizing protein, eating colorful produce, eating healthy fats, and making sure you're swapping out those packaged meals for fresh, real foods, drinking more water, not drinking your calories in sugary drinks. And, again, I just want to add, balance is key here. I'm not perfect. I literally shared last week on the podcast that I've been loving the Honey Stinger gluten-free energy waffles. Those are definitely ultra-processed, guys. And, I love having an occasional frozen margarita or a gluten-free cake, but it's not in my daily routine. That's really the point here. And when I first went gluten-free, all I was focusing on was removing the bad, removing the gluten. But when my mindset shifted to instead adding naturally gluten-free, whole, nutrient-dense foods, that's when I really started to thrive with celiac disease, because healing your gut requires nutrient-dense foods that fuel you and feed yourself better. And you really just have to shift your mindset to not just missing foods that you used to be able to eat when you had gluten and romanticizing these ultra-processed gluten-free packaged foods, but instead of eating with a mindset of how you want to feel, how you want to fuel your body, not how you want things to taste. I didn't heal by finding better gluten-free snacks at the grocery store. I really healed by just focusing on whole, natural foods that are naturally gluten-free. Now that we understand the why behind limiting ultra-processed foods and focusing on whole foods, I wanted to share my little routine with you guys of kind of what I eat in a day and what's worked for me. So I'm going to take you guys through a day in my life. So my morning routine, I usually do some sort of workout class or go on a run. And then after, I'll have breakfast. I used to skip breakfast and it would just leave me with an energy crash at 11 a.m. I felt miserable. I felt hangry. I was starving by lunch. But now I have a protein-rich, anti-inflammatory breakfast that keeps my blood sugar steady during the day and also fuels me post-run. So every morning I have a non-fat Greek-style yogurt, and I put kiwi, shout out my gluten-free fave of the week, blueberries, flax seeds, and walnuts in it. And I also have a non-fat milk latte. And research shows that steady blood sugar throughout the day helps reduce systematic inflammation and cortisol spikes, both of which matter for gut healing. So it really does affect you. Food is medicine. What you eat really does affect your inflammation, your gut health, and your lifestyle. For lunch, I usually will have some sort of protein, fiber, and healthy fat. I usually am in the office and I'll order a salad. So I'll get a salad with chicken and avocado or something. Sometimes they have dates too, which is delicious. And then for snacks, I like having watermelon or hard-boiled eggs, just simple things that are really easy to pack and have on the go. Hard-boiled eggs have really been a game changer for me. I used to be obsessed with a protein bar, and I will still have a protein bar sometimes. Again, like I said, this is, with the world that we live in, it's not completely realistic to be so one way or the other. I like having an RX bar. Over the summer, I was so obsessed with David bars, and I realized that they were actually wrecking my gut. It was insane. I literally could rant about David bars for 2 hours, and do a whole dissertation on them, but I was obsessed with David bars. I had one every day for like the entire month of July. And the more research I did on David bars, the more I realized how awful this was for my gut. They have so many sugar alcohols, one. The fat system, they have the modified plant fat, EPG. It's an engineered fat system that is just designed to give you basically the most amount of protein and the least amount of calories. And it's truly just the most ultra-processed thing you could possibly eat. And it seems really healthy because it's low calories, high protein. But if you really look at the ingredients list, there's no way that this protein bar is actually good for you. You're so much better just having a piece of plain protein. So I don't have those as a snack anymore. Another good snack or just something that's like fun to have is sparkling water. I love San Pellegrino. They also have fun flavors. But that's what I like to do for snacks. For dinner, I tend to just have some protein and veggies and carbs. So my go-to is salmon, broccoli, and quinoa. And it's delicious, and I could have it every day for the rest of my life. And also an important thing that's not food related, but with my routine is sleep. So important to get enough sleep every night because that's really one of the most anti-inflammatory habits that you can have. So just want to give a little plug for sleep. But really, the gist of all of this are the 3 R's of an anti-inflammatory routine. So 1, remove. Minimize ultra-processed gluten-free foods that spike inflammation. Actually read the ingredients list of the products that you're buying. Replace. Add nutrient-dense, naturally gluten-free options. And restore. Rebuild habits around sleep, hydration, and stress management to support your long-term healing. That's the gist of it, guys. So that's my anti-inflammatory whole foods routine. It's very simple. It can be difficult, though, in today's society because there's packaged stuff everywhere. If you go to the grocery store, like, it feels like 90% of the store is just stuff that's pre-packaged. It's the, like, vegetable and produce aisle and meat aisle really doesn't take up that much of the store these days. So it can take extra effort to have this routine in modern society. But if you have celiac disease, I think it's just really important to be intentional about that if you really are serious about improving your health and thriving. So I want to talk a bit more about mindset with this, and given that it is challenging in society to follow this anti-inflammatory whole foods diet, what's really worked for me in terms of implementing it. I want to mention realistic balance. I still enjoy gluten-free treats sometimes. I still enjoy some ultra-processed foods. I still will have added sugar sometimes. I still will have alcohol sometimes. Balance is everything. And I think balance is really important because I did go through a period where when I was first trying this out, I completely cut out alcohol and added sugars. And I was so intense about it, it almost became a bit too much where I was like scared of having alcohol, scared of having added sugars and ultra-processed foods. And that's just not a good mentality either. You really do have to have a balance with it. And it's very personal to find out what works for you. If you're able to have a balance with it, with cutting it out entirely, that's amazing. But that just didn't work for me. Now I'm finally at a place where I can enjoy a gluten-free treat or a cocktail without feeling guilty about it. And that's just made my life so much better and so much more fun. You still have to live at the end of the day while still prioritizing your health, and it's a fine balance, and that line is different for every single person depending on what you're dealing with, what your lifestyle is, and your circumstances. So you got to just listen to yourself and figure out what works for you, but finding balance in whatever that means for yourself is extremely important. It can be difficult to do this in modern society. There's packaged and ultra-processed foods all around us. It really has become the standard American diet, the SAD, as they say. So you really just have to be diligent, be disciplined, but stay true to yourself, listen to your body, and just do what's best for you. Just remember that food is medicine, and I really believe that a lifelong diet of whole nutrient-dense foods can do wonders for your future health, and everything that you eat is an investment in your future and your future physical health. So those are really the main things that I wanted to get into in today's episode. Let's wrap it up with a few big takeaways. I know this episode was a lot of information. 1, gluten-free doesn't always mean healthy. 2, whole foods are really where the healing begins in your body. 3, routine and balance heals, not perfection, not being completely one thing or the other. And 4, your mindset really matters. So that's what I want to leave you guys with. I really hope this episode resonated with you. If you've ever felt like you've just been doing everything right on a gluten-free diet, but you're still not feeling your best, maybe this is a piece of that puzzle. Again, it's like a holistic puzzle. This is just one of many Celiac Diaries podcast episodes. So this could just be one small piece of a part of your life that you could maybe think to optimize or improve and just start to feel better with celiac disease. But again, it's just all about trial and error. Learning information is power, guys, and doing what is best for you. So take what spoke to you from this episode and start small. Everyone is on their own journey. If you want to keep the conversation going, come say hi on Instagram and TikTok at Celiac Diaries Pod. I'd love to hear like what part of this episode really hit home for you and what you're thinking. If you did find this episode helpful, it would mean so much if you could rate and review the show and send it to a friend that has celiac or is gluten-free. We just want to keep growing this gluten-free community and have more people find the show and feel less alone and get information that might be really beneficial to them. So thank you guys so much for listening. I will see you guys next week. I think next week might be my Halloween themed episode. If not, it's coming. I've been getting some really good submissions from listeners on their gluten-free horror stories, as scary as they are. So stay tuned for that. And we also have some really exciting guests coming up, so I can't wait. I will catch you guys next Wednesday. Bye. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Celiac Diaries podcast. I hope you're leaving with a tip, a story, or just a little inspiration to live your best life with celiac. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the show, share it with a friend, or leave a review. I'll see you back here next Wednesday. And until then, stay well.